What we really want to do and what we strive to do with these sessions is to make sure that we make them engaging for everyone involved. So we do encourage you to share questions along the way. We're going to give you an opportunity to do that. The way that we're kind of going to do this, or our method of doing this, will be like this. If you have a question during the session, we encourage you to share that question down in the group chat. So in the general group chat. One of the co-hosts, so Whitney, Lisa, or Philip, will pick up and see that question, and be prepared. You will receive a notification. You may receive a private chat notification here on Zoom asking if you would like to come on camera and present your question. You can say yes to that, and if you do, we're going to ask that you unmute your camera and unmute your audio, and we'll bring you on camera, and then you'll be able to ask your question directly to myself and our guest speaker, who I'll introduce in just a moment. And if you, let's say you decide that you do not want to present your question on screen, that's totally fine. Just let one of the co-hosts know that you do not want to come on camera. They'll share their question with me, and then I'll ask that question on your behalf as well. So those are really the general rules here. We just want to give you all an opportunity to engage and talk. But before we do that and we get into this, I wanted to take a moment and actually introduce our guest speaker to you, and that's Angie Duplass. Angie is actually a community sourcer with Advent Health, and she's worked with Advent Health for a few years now. But prior to her start actually with Advent Health, Angie worked with Full Sail University. So she has an extensive background in entertainment. That background made her a perfect fit for Full Sail University's Career Development Department. And while working there, she assisted students and graduates and also entertainment industry employers with matching them or connecting them to find that right fit for jobs for those individuals who are students who worked at or attended Full Sail. So as the university grew, leadership at that university realized that the faculty recruitment department needed to grow, and Angie was actually helped to kind of start a grassroots effort to build their faculty recruiting department. She spent nearly 10 years, or actually 13 years, at Full Sail before she went to Advent Health. And, you know, honestly, we thought that she would be an excellent person to speak on today's topic. So Angie, we would like to welcome you, and how are you today?
I'm doing great. Brandon, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I am super excited to be here and very honored to be a part of what you guys are doing with professionals care.
Thank you, and we're excited to have you here as well. So I wanted to just start off with you telling us more about your role. What is it that you exactly do as a community sourcer with Advent Health?
So community sourcing is considered to be the top of the funnel when it comes to reaching out to candidates. So I give presentations, I establish relationships, go into the different schools and community organizations to talk about Advent Health, some of the roles within that would be applicable, and just funnel those candidates on in as a sourcer. What I find the most enriching and what I end up being is this hub that is a relationship builder between myself, external organizations, again, like schools and community organizations, and also internal. So between talent acquisition and our marketing strategy department, some of our clinical educators that handle internships and externships, other departments within Advent Health. And I'm just kind of this centerpiece that connects with a bunch of different people, either routing questions, candidates, support. That's another thing that I've found is that level of support. Hey, if somebody is supporting me, I'm going to support them, and vice versa. And that's one of the amazing things that I find when it comes to networking, and why I'm really excited to talk about that. It is all about cultivating good relationships so that those people can be supportive to you when it's time.
Excellent. And that leads me into my next question as well. Looking at what you do as a community sourcer, do you believe that networking is an important aspect of your job?
Absolutely. You just never know the kinds of things that are going to pop up, and that's one of the things I will say with Advent Health specifically, is they've been very supportive of grand ideas, thinking outside of the box. Hey, I have this idea of a nurse coffee chat event, which is one of the things that I get to do. And they say, okay, yeah, that's great, run with it. So you have to reach out, you have to, have these networks, because you just never know what's going to come up. And if you don't have the relationships to be able to leverage the relationships, it's going to be that much harder to be successful in whatever endeavors that you're going to get into.
Exactly. When we think about networking, so early on, before we started this session, I mentioned or told a story about how networking was a very uncomfortable process for myself early on. And it took me a while to warm up to actually find kind of my flow when it came to networking. And I always share this story. So I worked at Walt Disney World. I still work for the company, but when I started out as a leader at Disney, I remember the first time I had to go to a networking session, and it was very much like a speed dating style arrangement where there were multiple leaders in the room, had to work the room and talk with all these individuals and share my business card as well. And this was before the days of LinkedIn, where we could easily go in and connect with people that way. But I still remember how nervous I was. And a lot of that just simply stemmed from the fact that I tell people I'm an introvert and I don't necessarily like to put myself out there when it comes to networking. And one of the most important things I remembered about that session was that although it was beneficial, I don't necessarily think I networked properly at that time. I was so much focused on the quantity and the number of individuals that I needed to meet and handing out my business cards, that I wasn't necessarily focused on the quality of my networks at that time too. So I wanted to ask you, oftentimes you'll hear individuals say to focus on quality over quantity. Do you agree with that statement? And why do you think it's so important to focus on quality, the quality of your networks, as opposed to the quantity of those individuals that you're networking with?
I think it comes to, you get what you give. And this is something I see a lot, not just with my personal experience on LinkedIn, but what I see with other people. So when you get out there and you start to really invest in other people, let me take the time to read what you're posting and offer some authentic and insightful responses. I'm going to make a connection, right? And then I've seen people come into a situation where they say, hey, I just finished this new demo reel. And then people will go out of their way, because they have a relationship with this person, to share that post. COVID-19, I see people say, hey, folks, I'm the next in the line of folks that lost their job. And so many people just swooped in to support them and say, hey, I know somebody, or I have this connection here, or I have this potential lead for you. And, if you don't be intentional, if you're just like, I'm gathering numbers, people are going to be like, oh man, that's tough. Or, hey, maybe I'll just click like on your demo. Or, man, sorry about your luck. Versus alternatively, if you are being very intentional and looking at quality, you get what you give.
I agree. I agree. What are some ways that if you were to recommend to individuals, what are some ways that you can focus on quality as opposed to quantity? So you're building your networks early on. I think that sometimes, again, as we said before, you're all about meeting people and getting your name out there. What are some things that we could do actually to focus more so on the quality of our networks as opposed to the quantity?
It's a little challenging to be discerning sometimes, because on one hand, you want to make sure that you're not just bringing in the people that are going to just start bombarding you with sales. And unfortunately, as a woman, and granted, maybe gentlemen deal with this as well, sometimes people think that LinkedIn or other social types and networks, when you're there for work, is a dating app. So You want to try to be a little bit mindful of those pitfalls, but at the same time, you just never know where life is going to take you. You never know what's going to happen. You never know. So try to think outside of the box. Some people are going to be there because they need to hear your message. Some people are going to come in because maybe at some point you need to hear their message, and just taking that discernment. And then if things go awry, if somebody is maybe not the right fit for you, don't be afraid to step away. It's okay. This is, you're creating something that is around you, which is not just with your career, but also your energy. So
Mhm.
if you have to say no or no thank you, it's okay.
Would you recommend for individuals who are starting out and trying to build their networks to diversify the number of individuals that they're networking with, or uh, essentially, would you encourage them to branch out? So sometimes we tend to stick within our circles and within our groups. Uh, do you recommend that individuals branch out and try to diversify the type of individuals that they're meeting with when they're starting out early on with their networking?
Well, it depends. Are you networking? I guess it depends on what you're doing. Like, are you networking because you have a business that you're looking to, essentially sell to people? Or are you looking for career support? Are you looking for, you're just growing your community? I think it just has to do with the strategy of what your intention is. And I think just anytime people should just be open to different kinds of people, but it may not make sense to just go out and just start like digging in every single corner. It, again, you might have to be a little bit more strategic with whatever your process is, depending on what the plan is.
Mhm. And something else that I always recommend to do, or really starting out, is to search within your own networks before you branch out. So
Yeah.
I find that always works out well. So maybe reaching out to individuals who are already in your current networks and seeing if they can connect you with another individual within their network. And it's kind of funny because we've seen this in action with this project that we're doing right now. uh, from developing and putting these webinars together. It's been about trying to reach within our networks to identify people who would, one, be great individuals to serve as subject matter experts, then other individuals who could provide their expertise around certain topics behind the scenes with what we're doing as well. So that's one way that I mentioned too is a great way to kind of start off. Don't think everyone in the world that you've got to reach out to, but maybe start in your collective network that you have, and then work your way up from there. I think that's perfect. um, the other thing I like to talk about as part of this is, again, we talk about the quality of your networks, but a lot of what we do within professional networking has to do with cultivating that relationship. So there's a great podcast that I encourage everyone to check out. We'll actually share that with you today. But the podcast is called Coaching for Leaders, and it's hosted by a gentleman by the name of Dave Stachowiak. And Dave actually interviewed another gentleman by the name of Tom Henschel, and they talk about professional networking, but something that they highlight in that is, with networking, you have individuals who will plant and or kind of cultivate those relationships, and you have other individuals who will solely go out for the hunt. So Tom says that with networking, it's all about planting, it's not hunting. Would you agree with that statement?
100%. I find if somebody has taken the time to connect with me, to chat with me, to even care, then if they reach out and say, hey, I'm looking for this kind of thing, would you mind sharing my resume? Absolutely, I will bend over backwards. But there have been people where, hey, I don't know you at all, and then I get a connection request. Okay, great. And then they're like, hey, can you get me a job? And it's like, whoa, 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 who are you? It's very similar situation. Like, again, if if you're applying to a job and you're getting a job interview and you don't bother to research the company, it gives the employer a feeling like you don't want to be here. It's like a
Right.
relationship. You want to be in a relationship with somebody who cares about you, what you're important to you, what your interests are, and it's a two-way street. It should be mutually beneficial. So really plant those seeds, and it doesn't have to take hours and hours of your time. Take maybe an hour, maybe a day, once a week, to go in, make some connections, look at what people are posting, make a comment, have it be meaningful. And it doesn't have to be like, I've commented on every single person in my network. No, like just look through, see some stuff, see some things that pop out at you. If you see a LinkedIn Learning or a article, hey, let me check that out. It might enrich you. And then you can even comment back to the person that posted, hey, wow, this was really insightful. What did you think about it? And then you have an engagement situation right there. Perfect.
Right. And I, you said that perfectly. And you talked about leveraging LinkedIn in order to build those connections. That's definitely something we're going to touch on a little later in this session too. But one of the things I think this goes back to is the quality of your networks again, and not the quantity. And for myself, I firmly believe that it's important to focus on the quality because you're allowed to continue to check in with those individuals in your network. So if you have a massive number of people that you're constantly trying to reach out to every week or every 2 weeks, it becomes difficult. And it makes it very difficult for you to build that relationship with that person because you know them by name, but they don't know much about you. So I think what you stated there goes back and ties back into the quality of your networks as opposed to the quantity. We have a question already, so I wanted to open the floor to participant questions. And we have Blake with us. Blake, are you there?
Mr. Rhodes, I am here, sir.
Blake, it is great to see you again. Welcome back. Blake was here for our first session we did 2 weeks ago. Blake, I'm going to open the floor to you and allow you to share your question with us.
Awesome. Well, first, Mr. Plea, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. The advice you're giving is great so far. And with that, and we've talked about some people asking for jobs immediately as you connect, through LinkedIn. What are some social faux pas that you've seen through networking throughout your career that we could really learn from?
Well, the one you just touched on. I think not taking the time to invest in a person, and it doesn't have to be a very long length of time, but just making that person feel like a human being, establishing a relationship, and then moving forward. I would also say not having sufficient information about you on your LinkedIn. So if I go to your page and I can't tell, like, if you have appropriate experience, what your background is, where you're going, what kinds of things you're looking for, that's a little tough and hard to navigate. So that's a way that you're doing yourself a disservice. I think trying to engage in personal connections, trying to pick up people, I just find that LinkedIn is typically the place where people are there for professional reasons and not personal reasons. I personally am not appreciative of those moments. So I would refrain from those kinds of situations. I think it's also too important to remember that even though LinkedIn is typically geared for people who are there for professional situations, their career, professionally minded, we're there to network, it's not devoid of trolls. You do have people that are there to get people riled up, to make nasty comments, and to, again, remember your social media hygiene, especially if you're in a position of you're putting yourself out there because you want maybe some new opportunities. Maybe you're at a space of I'm looking for what's my next role within the organization or even without. Just don't engage. Now, I would say you're going to want to have some level of discernment, because especially now of what we're dealing with in society, not speaking out for some things sometimes can be detrimental. So you want to have that I'm not getting sucked in by somebody who's purposely trying to trigger me, right? But also, if you see something that is just hate and inappropriate, and be okay to speak up, even if you don't put it up publicly. Maybe message that person privately, but again, you don't want to get caught up in the minutia. And I think that that element is probably one of the most core things that I feel when it comes to networking at all. You're putting yourself out there, but you're not putting your personal baggage out there. Right. So you're going to have things that trigger you. You're going to have your insecurities. You're going to want to reach out to a person and say something, but maybe you're like, oh, maybe they think I'm not qualified enough or not good enough, or I just don't have the pizzazz that I see that company usually is looking for. You got to get rid of all that. You got to get all of that off of the table. Know your worth and put yourself out there anyways, even if you have to act as if for a period of time. If you're a marketing person, or you're going to school for hospitality, put yourself out there. It's okay. Know that, hey, I've got what it takes, and I'm going to talk to these people as if I've been working in this industry forever. I know what I'm talking about. I bring something to the table. I have value. I have worth. So don't be afraid, but at the same time, don't let yourself, bring in that baggage. Don't get triggered by people. Again, there's going to be people that are going to specifically get out there just to get people fired up because they want attention or what have you. So have that personal yet not personal balance.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Duplay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. And thank you, Blake, and thank you for joining us again. We're so excited to have you with us. It's interesting because we talked about LinkedIn. It seems like that we're getting some questions coming in regards to LinkedIn and how to leverage LinkedIn as part of the professional networking process. So the first question actually comes from Danielle Smith. And Danielle wanted to know, what are your tips for making your LinkedIn stand out? So you did briefly highlight LinkedIn in your last question, your last response, but what are some tips for making your LinkedIn just stand out against the crowd?
I think that when you can have a nice, clean, have some information, but it doesn't need to be every bit of nitty gritty. It can be concise, give some meat and potatoes, but it doesn't need to have all of the accoutrement. It's not Thanksgiving dinner. It's it's a meal, but it doesn't have to be all the dressing and the decorations and that kind of thing. I think if you can include some media, whether it's something representative of whatever work that you're doing, if it's something that represents the company you're working for, the company, or if it's your art or your media, or maybe a piece of your demo or something to that effect. We're just in a space of people like pictures. I find that I get a lot of response when I post pictures with my posts. Even if it's pictures of me, people get really excited about that. I think just having authenticity, even if you don't have a lot to offer, you're coming right out of school, that's totally okay. You can even list, hey, you know what, here's some really powerful, relevant courses that I took. I think being in groups, talking about your interests, because I think it gives you the opportunity to even say, here are some things that I'm interested in. These are ways that you are painting a picture of yourself to a person that, hey, maybe I'm doing a search, because a lot of recruiters get out there and they do searches. So they're going to be looking at you and you may not even know it. So if you can do that in a way that accurately and cleanly represents you, I recommend that.
And I agree with that, especially for our participants who are currently in college or just entering the workforce from college, so recently graduated. I think it's important that you think about your schooling and what you did in college as a career. you have some professional background in school. So anytime that you can highlight, as you mentioned, whether it's groups that you've participated in, did you take the initiative on a project, a group project, a school project, highlight those things in your conversation. So I think that adds more weight and credibility to who you are when you're able to do that as well. That's perfect. We have another question actually in regards to LinkedIn too. And this one actually goes back to LinkedIn. I want to pull up the question real fast to make sure we have it. It's from Lily. Lily's with us today, but I'm going to ask the question on her behalf. Lily wanted to know how much should be listed on LinkedIn. So for example, should I have my full resume listed on LinkedIn with my previous roles, or is less more?
I personally, again, you ask 5 different people, you're going to get 5 different answers. I personally think not having all of the details on there is better. It's kind of a coming attractions. I know that there are some employers, if you're applying to roles, you can say, hey, here's my LinkedIn, and not necessarily include a resume. I'm a little more old school, I guess, where I would like to see a resume. So I would love to have that be a preview of you and get a sense of, okay, so here's some of the experience, here's what she knows how to do, or what has she done. But I also would love to have that entice me to make that next step and say, okay, I would love to see your resume. Let's start taking this connection to the next step. Let's start talking in person, or maybe set something up, or, send it on over. That way we can just get a little bit more there. Whereas I think LinkedIn is a little bit more for here's some highlights.
Makes sense. Makes sense. While we have everyone on the line and everyone's still participating and engaged in this session, I want to present a poll question if we can. I'm curious to see how many of you actually enjoy professional networking. And it's okay. If you say no, it's totally fine. If you say yes, hey, even great. Again, I go back to the beginning and I said that some of us will absolutely love networking, and there's some of us who are going to say, it's okay, maybe. So what we'll do is we're going to see if we can pull up that poll for you. There it is right now. So just answer that, take a moment, and just let us know, do you enjoy networking? Yes, no, maybe, sometimes.
Ooh.
Your results are anonymous as well, so do not fear. If you say no, we're not going to call you out. So it's important to note that.
So check this out.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the poll, and I see the word networking, right? It has so much stigma to it. And I think, I don't know that I like networking. But if you say, do you like relationship building, which is networking? Oh yeah, I love that.
Exactly.
Our perspective.
Right. And I think, again, it goes back to the perspective. If you think of it as networking, it's more of a task. It's something that you feel like that has to be done. There are studies out there and research that shows that between 70 to 80% of jobs that are offered were offered due to networking. But I think it's great that you look at it from that perspective, that it's all about relationship building. And if we view it that way, we can approach it from a far different angle as well. So 56% of you said yes, you enjoy networking. 13% said no, and 31% said sometimes. So you're in the middle of the road. That's perfect. Aha. Let's go back. I want to go back to LinkedIn for just a moment. And I know that it can be very discouraging. Let's say that you reach out to an individual. You're like, great, I really, really want to talk to this individual. They work for a company that I've always wanted to work for. They seem to carry a lot of clout behind their position and their name. You send a message to that individual and you do not hear back from that person. It can be very discouraging. Do you have any recommendations or feedback to anyone who has tried that? They've reached out to a person to try to get that network started, but they're not hearing back from the other party.
I would say, and this, if you never take any piece of career advice ever, take this one. Don't take it personally. Whatever it is, don't take it personally. And I've had that happen before where I've reached out to people like, oh my God, this is my dream company. And then like chirp, 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 chirp. It could be a lot of things. It could be that person doesn't really check their messages that often. It could be that person doesn't feel comfortable reaching out to people. You have to understand, yes, you've gone through a lot and it's awesome that you took that step to put yourself out there. Maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to somebody they don't know. Maybe they have their own baggage and stuff that they're like, ugh. You just never know what this situation is. There's so many different variables to it. Don't take it personally. And you know what? We can even take it to the bigger ethereal picture that maybe you're being saved from something that wasn't right for you. Maybe it wasn't right for you in general. Maybe it's not right for you at that time. Maybe you're being directed to either another opportunity, or maybe to, again, come out of yourself a little bit more. Maybe it's to learn to persevere and to talk to more people, or to, oh, maybe let me circle back around and see, do I not have what that company is looking for? I count myself as a creative person, but I'm also not creative in a lot of ways, where I look, if I don't have to reinvent the wheel, I'm not going to. So when I was in a position of looking for a new role, and I'm looking at positions that I like and that I feel I would be interested in, I started taking a sample. What are some job positions looking for? And do I have that? Or is it listed either on my LinkedIn or my resume? You know, sometimes we have that disconnect. You know, you think like, oh, well, I know how to do this, you know, or this kind of position or this kind of role, and it's not there. You know, you're not conveying that. If it's not on your LinkedIn and you're looking for your LinkedIn to speak for you in some kind of way, you got to put it out there. And especially, you know, I talked about media earlier. If you are a creative person, if you work in media in any kind of way, I'm going to expect to see something.
Right.
You know, it should represent you and what journey you're looking to get into.
Right. How about elevator pitch, and having that elevator pitch prepared when you go into these networking opportunities? So when you're trying to build that relationship early on. Now, again, I think you're going to get different perspectives on this, because the one thing I always recommend when you're doing that official or that first reach out to an individual, we'll talk this in a moment, don't make it all about you. That's the important thing. Don't make it all about you, but you still, at some point, you have to sell yourself. Do you feel like, one, is it important to sell yourself at the very beginning of that communication that you're sending out to this contact or to this possible new network? Or is it something that you should hold off and wait until you get to know that person and you've kind of established that relationship early on with that person?
I feel like without knowing specific context, what I would say is view your elevator pitch as the context of why you're reaching out to this person. So it could be, hey, you know, I noticed that you work at Disney. I used to work at Disney, and I really feel it on my heart to get back in there. I see that you do XYZ with them, and I wondered if, you know, you could give me any pointers or any support. You know, this is something that I'm interested in. You know, can you give me some perspective? You know, when Disney is looking for a candidate like that, what kinds of things make a candidate stand out? You know, so you're giving the you part, but you're also encasing it in, this is why this person is uniquely qualified to answer these questions, or to give you that support or that guidance or that connection.
Perfect. Do you recommend that people start their networking the moment that they are looking for a position? So let's say I need a job at this point. I'm looking for a job. Oh my goodness, I need to go on LinkedIn and begin networking with people. Do you recommend people to start their networking then? Or when do you really recommend or suggest that people should begin networking?
Ideally, it would begin before then. So if you're in school currently, start now, start last week. I think it's important to start, again, the process ahead of time. That's not to say that if you find yourself, oh no, I'm in a situation where I'm in need of a job, you can absolutely get out there. And I would say, just be honest. Hey guys, new to LinkedIn, found myself in a position where I need work. What kind of guidance can you offer? You guys have clearly been here a while. Can somebody show me around? Don't be afraid to ask. That's another big important element that sometimes is tough for us when we are networking or relationship building is speaking up and asking. We as a society have a hard time speaking our truth, speaking up for ourselves for so many reasons. A lot of times if somebody's talking to you and they get emotional, they'll say, what? Oh, I'm so sorry. Why? Let's not be that way. Let's ask, hey man, I'm in a tough spot. I'm new. Can somebody show me, or can somebody recommend, what have you? People will be so happy to help. Let them help. That's what they're there for.
Right. And on the same token, we talk about networking and helping, let them help. I believe that with networking, you have to reciprocate. Part of networking is giving back. You talk about building relationships. I think the most important way that you can add value to that professional relationship, or that relationship that you're building with an individual, is to find ways to help and give back. And I know you highlighted a little earlier in regards to what college students can be doing during this time to kind of market and sell themselves. But what are some other things that you think we could collectively do as a whole to try to give back and help? So I always think LinkedIn is a great resource of doing that, but there are some other ways that you can help contribute to your networks or give back to the people that you're connecting with.
I would say tap into your gifts. What makes you passionate? Because when you find that excitement, uh, this sounds silly and sounds like what, but really when people say follow your bliss, it does make a difference, because people can feel inspired by that, and then they feel like they have permission to follow what makes them happy and excited. And even especially in times like now, if it's something that you feel gifted in and passionate about, it's going to give you the oomph that you need to keep going, keep with it. There's going to be times where maybe you're not getting the response that you're wanting, and you're like, oh, I'm just trying to help. But just keep going, keep putting that message out there, keep putting yourself out there. If you feel like, hey, I don't really have a lot in the tank, but here's some positive words, or here's some support, or maybe just it doesn't have to be huge.
Right.
Whatever you're feeling called to do it, even if it feels weird. Sometimes those are the most divinely orchestrated moments of our lives.
Right. So the next question I wanted to ask is from Rob, and it's Rob Badori. And Rob wanted to know, what are some great icebreakers to use while trying to network in career paths outside of your current specialty? So essentially, you're looking to change career paths at this point. What are some ways to kind of just break that ice and get yourself in to network with someone in a completely different field?
I have found, because I've had some people reach out to me in similar situations, and I have found the ones where they ask me about me, like, what was my journey? How did somebody who worked in entertainment end up working in healthcare? You're like, what was that journey like? I feel like, wow, this person is genuinely invested and wants to hear what I want to say. And then just sharing what that experience was can be really helpful and insightful. Wow, sometimes we say, this is where I want to be, but I don't know how to get there. Like, what are the inroads to leading to that pathway? And sometimes you might find that it is more accessible than you thought previously. So just asking, I find asking questions is so the best icebreaker in any kind of
Story
social
time.
situation.
Right,
Yes,
exactly. Story
yes.
time. And I love that. You know, I think if you take that opportunity to get to hear and learn the story of the person that you're networking with, it goes a long way. One, that individual will value you in the future because it shows that you have a genuine interest in them. You're not solely networking just because you need a job, but you're networking because you want this person in your network and you feel that they're going to add value to your career and to your life. And I think that moment that you're actually sitting down and you're having that conversation and getting to know them and asking them questions, or that individual questions, about how they started, how they were able to build their career and get to where they are today, it goes a long way. And I will tell you, typically, when you start that message off that way, you're more likely to get a response back, I think, just because you're taking
Absolutely.
a sincere interest in that person. So the next question comes from Danielle, and it actually relates to, again, thinking about crossing over into different industries. But let's say you have good work experience, but you want to join a different industry. How do you position your transferable skills? So I guess, how do you highlight and showcase your transferable skills?
A couple ways that I recommend doing that is again, doing some research. When you start looking at what it is that you want to do, you'll start to notice the trends, the things that people are asking for, the things they're looking for. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I definitely have that. Um, I just need to maybe reword it. Reach out, and you don't necessarily have to hire a resume coach. There are tons of people who are happy, absolutely happy to help you with your resume, to give a critique of, hey, have you thought about saying this? Or I noticed that you said that, but if you like really bring that out and maybe put that to the forefront, that's absolutely, the same kind of thing here. I would also recommend groups. There's so many interest groups. Get into a group and just start to see what are some of the conversations, essentially, like, let me just look at these people and how they talk and what they're talking about, and hearing again, what are their stories, and it's just doing that research, just really being observant, and then taking a step back and seeing, okay, well, I definitely have these skills. I maybe just need to reword it, or, redirect it in a different kind of way. But there's so much that is translatable. I get a lot of nurses, a lot of GNs that are really nervous to include some of their past experience on their resume. And I say, absolutely add it, especially if you've worked in hospitality or any kind of service industry. When I talk about not taking things personally, I know y'all know what I'm talking about. It is taking whatever crazy stuff happens, putting a smile on your face, not internalizing it, and just diffusing a situation. I think the business term they like to use is de-escalating. Do you know how huge being able to de-escalate a situation is when you're trying to be a leader in the corporate world, versus if you're working in the service industry, you do that all day, every day.
Right.
So talk about translatable skills. Absolutely. I love seeing that kind of stuff, because to me, that paints a picture of what this person is capable of. And especially when, you're asking them to do something, working in a hospital, I know that this person isn't going to crumble when things go awry, or if they see some things or handle some situations. People go into the hospital because they're probably having the worst day of their lives. And I
Right.
know that that person is going to be there.
When we go back to building the relationship, so you've done that part. You've reached out to an individual. It seems like, the first communications are going well. It's great. When you build that initial relationship, Blake wanted to know, how often would you keep in touch with those individuals ideally?
If I'm being strategic about it, I would say check in maybe every couple weeks, and I
Mhm.
wouldn't have it be like, hey, I'm just checking in.
Right.
Again, try to think of something thoughtful to say or contribute, or, hey, I know things are crazy. I want to make sure that you're well. How's your family? Again, you're not asking that person personal, like, hey, do you have any kids? Do you have a boyfriend? Like, oh, it's okay to treat them like a person, without having to go into that, like, I'm seeking, a relationship or otherwise. But definitely, I would say check in every couple of weeks.
Mhm. No, I agree. And again, what you mentioned with that is it doesn't have to be lengthy either. I always say when you check in with someone, don't worry, you don't need to send like a long message. Easiest thing is just to check in. How are you? Are you doing well? And that's important, especially now during these times. And with many of us, we were staying home and working from home as well. It's always important just to check in. So, and I've done my best to continue doing that during this time. So if an individual reaches out to me, just making sure that on occasion that I just check in, how are you doing? Just wanted to see how life is treating you at this moment. And likewise, you know what? They'll reciprocate it and do the same for me. Hey, Brandon, just wanted to check in and see how life was treating you. That goes back to fostering and building those relationships. I think that's perfect. If I were to ask you, just in regards to thinking about LinkedIn, what are some things, again, we talked about what are some things that you can place on LinkedIn before you start to reach out to your networks, but do you think that personal brand and your personal image is important when it comes to professional networking? So before you start that communication with someone, do you feel it's important to look at, one, what am I posting on social media? Two, what am I posting on LinkedIn as well? Do you feel that's an important thing that you should look at before you actually begin reaching out to people?
I absolutely do. And for a couple different reasons. Not only does it give a really clear, concise conveyance and message of who you are, and what you bring to the table, but it also gives you a little bit more confidence when like, what am I going to say? What is my elevator pitch? If you say, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, this is what my values are, it's so much easier to talk about that because you've got it at the ready. It's something you're passionate about. You've really tapped into that versus the I'm panicking and all of this personal insecurity stuff. It's coming to the surface and I'm just completely coming unglued. This person's like, so how are you? And you're like, versus, hey, this is something that I am constantly working at. I'm constantly putting out. I just feel, and this is going to sound really corny, but just roll with it. I feel that social media presence is like feeding stray cats, right? You got to put out food and it's got to be decent food. And then, maybe these cats totally devoured what it was. And then you got to make sure it's not empty. You got to keep putting out some content. And maybe this person nibbled at it and, okay, that's kind of old and I got to get rid of that and just, move on. It's okay. They didn't like that brand, but you just got to keep on. And then eventually, they're going to catch on that there's food there and then more cats are going to come. And then those cats are going to, hey, why are they? And then all of a sudden everybody is coming and hanging out and your place is the place to be. And it's cat town central and we're all having a good time.
I love that analogy too. So yeah, it's like feeding the stray cats. So perfect. So I just wanted to quickly go back to your role at Advent Health. And I know that during this time, you all have been providing a number of resources to individuals who are, looking for a job down the road or just to get them prepared. And this was very important to us. And it was the whole purpose of this project and our webinars that we're doing. We recognize and we understand that right now, that the job market, it's a very difficult and challenging place right now. We know that there are not a lot of jobs out there, especially in some industries such as tourism and hospitality. But something that you highlighted on yesterday when we kind of had our preparation for this session was just the fact that although we may not have a lot of jobs out there at this moment, there's still so much that you could be doing during this time to prepare yourself. and get be on the ground running as soon as things do return to some sense of normalcy at some point. So would you just take a moment and just share some of the resources that you all are providing and that you're providing through Advent Health to help those individuals who are looking to develop and build their career?
Absolutely. So I, as you said, had shared with you a website, and it's essentially our events page that talks about the various chat sessions that we have. We're getting ready to roll out some virtual webinars. One is about career and resume tips. And then I'm doing my soft launch is coming up. It got officially approved today for Coffee Talk with Angie. And you can actually start registering that for that now. And my first thing is going to be now the virtual interview. So again, just taking that process and how we're handling it in the virtual COVID-19 world that we're living in right now. And just, again, supporting, making ourselves available. There's multitudes of chat sessions available pretty much at any time that is a normal, office hour time. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I have people that pop in multiple times. Hey, it's great to see you again. How are things? And then people will follow up. And if, we need to do a breakout session for a mock interview or a resume critique, we do those as well. That's one of the amazing things of this role, is getting to be there to support people and to be an advocate of my connections. Hey, you're applying to this role? Let me know so that I can share your resume with the recruiter, because I know you and I am willing to speak for you because we have that connection and that relationship. So please take advantage of it, especially these days. People like me, like Brandon and his team, we want to help. We want to be there for you. And sometimes we don't know that you need it unless you let us know.
Exactly. And I think it's amazing what you're doing during this time. And I hope that many of the individuals who are participating in today's session will take advantage of your resources. I do want to mention on our end, it's funny that we talk about this topic of professional networking and giving back and helping each other. We want to give back as part of this. So our goal and our mission, Angie has some resources that you can tap into. I've shared that link actually in the chat. So you'll be able to look at some of the virtual chat offerings that Advent sign up. The other thing we wanted to mention too, myself along with a few other individuals who have helped with these sessions, are going to open up us. So we're going to set aside and do 30-minute just casual chat sessions about anything you want to talk about when it comes to developing your career, whether it is resume reviews or interview preparation. We're going to open that up to you all. So you're going to receive a follow-up email over the next couple of days in regards to this session that we had today, but that follow-up email will also have information regarding how you can register and sign up for a time to meet with one of us, so that way we can sit down and talk with you too. So we wanted to make sure that those resources are available, and we want to share that with the world and with you.
And
all
that is
too.
huge.
So
people take advantage of that. If somebody is willing to help, even if you feel like, hey, I've got it all together, maybe you'll learn something you didn't know. You never know.
Yeah, I agree. Angie, let me say thank you so much for being part of today's session. We are pretty much out of time. It's almost 5 o'clock. But I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. And of course, for everyone who's in the room and participating in today's session, we can't thank you enough for being here as well. We couldn't have done it without you. This isn't the end. We have more sessions on the way. We have another session coming on June 24th. With an amazing guest speaker as well, Dan Cockrell, who was the previous vice president, one of our former vice presidents at Walt Disney World, will be joining us. And Dan is going to talk about informal leadership and developing your leadership skills. So more information coming on that. And we'll have other sessions coming up in July as well. But again, thank you all so much for joining us today. Before we wrap up, we're going to bring up one more poll, and we just want to make sure and see if you enjoyed today's session. So I'm going to launch this poll now. If you'll just take a moment and just answer the following question: did you find today's session informative and useful? And we will give you about 30 seconds. So we'll wait till we receive all of our responses. And then there will be one more question that will pop up in just a moment. All right, perfect. So we're going to go to our next poll question. And here it is. Would you attend a future webinar or workshop session?
Yeah, I'm totally signing up for that. Next one.
Yes. We love it. All right, so we're going to we'll give you about 10 more seconds to respond while we do that. Angie, do you have any parting words or anything that you would like to share with the group today?
Ooh, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for caring about yourself enough to take the time to do this. Thank you, Brandon and your team, for caring about the world enough to create this space for all of us to be here. So I am just overwhelmed with gratitude and just excited to know that there are awesome people out there.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you so much for being our guest today. And again, thank you all for being here, and we hope to see you for a future session. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we're free. You're free for the day. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and we hope to see you soon.
Take care of yourself.
Have a great day. Bye, everyone.